December 18, 2025, Buddhadhamma, chapter 8.6, page 883. Systematic outlines of concentration practice. Gautama's Buddhist teachings on the way to realize nibbita, nirvana, or nibbana usually includes the contemplation of phenomenon as presented earlier in this chapter. When these teachings are presented systematically, then the stages of practice are usually presented in a broad general sense. The most detailed and frequent systematic teaching outlines the holy life, brahmacharya, or the way of practice of a bhikkhu, a monk, from the time of ordination up to the cessation, nirodha, of asavas, the cessation of the taints. A similar teaching given occasionally by Gautama Buddha and his disciples is that the 15 ways of practice, karana, the three kinds of knowledge, vijja. Alternatively, one finds a group of gradual attainments. For example, the 7 purifications or the 9 purifications. We can assume that the reason these teachings are presented in a general way is that the specific details of practice are transmitted through direct application. According to the methods particular teachers use to train their students, minor details would have different differed among different teachers. These styles of practice would have been passed down into the time of the commentators, who compiled and recorded some of them. The most prominent of these latter texts is the Visuddhimagga by Buddhadhamma. The Visuddhimagga presents a gradual course of practice, both in regards to the external activities as well as the development of wisdom, panya. In the terms of panya, wisdom, it outlines the stages of higher knowledge, development, jnana. The general framework follows the teaching of the 3 trainings, the Tiso Sikha, the 3 trainings, and then expands these terms into the 7 purification, Visuddhi, the gradual development of insight, Vipassana, jnana, found in the Visuddhimagga is an expansion from the material found in the Patisamupata, which is the dependent origination, the 12 forward and backwards of the dependent origination. Below is a summary of the systematic teaching found in the Visuddhimagga by Buddhadhamma. First, let us look at the meaning of some of these important terms. Visuddhi means purity, gradual purification, qualities that purify beings, enabling a perfection of the threefold training, Tiso Sikha, and leading to the realization of nibbita, or nirvana, or nibbana. There are 7 stages to be discussed below. Parina means comprehensive knowledge of these. There are 3 kinds. The first kind of knowledge is Natha Parina, familiarity, recognition, knowledge of specific attributes. For example, one knows sensation and knows that it has the quality of feeling, sense impressions. One knows perceptions and knows that perception has the function of destination. One knows what things are. Those were examples of Vedana and Sanya. The second kinds of the three knowledge of Parina is Tirana Parina, meaning investigation. One applies a deeper level of wisdom by knowing the universal characteristics of things, that they follow natural laws and are characterized by impermanence, stress, and non-self. For example, one knows that feeling and perceptions are unstable, of the nature to change and not self. One knows how things are. So basically applying sanya and vedana to titlakkhana, anikata, dukkata, anatta. The third kind of parina is pahana parina, meaning abandonment. Knowledge that leads to letting go. Of attachment. To freedom and to the absence of infatuation. One knows how to respond to and behave in relation to things. For example, knowing that things are impermanent, anatta, or anika, knowing things that are impermanent, anika, one abandons the perception, sanya, of permanence. Nikka sanya, one knows how to act. Then we have, so those are the three meanings of kinds of knowledge, parina. Vipassana nana, this means insight knowledge. Knowledge that give rise to insight. Knowledge that leads to a thorough understanding of risen phenomenon and to the end of dukkha. It divided into 9 kinds. The different kinds of knowledge, nana, below are followed by numbers in parentheses, are part of more recently formed group of 16 kinds of knowledge. Solasa, nana. They are used to verify a person's level of attainment. Now, here we're going to go through each list. These are the principles of practice according to the Visuddhimagga, a commentary written by Buddhadhamma. 1. Training in higher morality. Ati sila sikha. Purification of morality. Sila visuddhi. Good conduct. Right livelihood. Ethical conduct. Appropriate to one's social standing. The Visuddhimagga focus primarily on the 4 moral standards for purity. Parisuddhi sila for bhikkhus. Patimokkha sambara sila. Restraint and strict adherence into relation to the monastic code of discipline. Indriya sambara sila. Restraint to the sense faculties, causation or caution, while receiving sense impressions in order to prevent unskillful mental states from possessing the mind. Avijja parisuddhi sila. Right livelihood. Pachayasana nisita sila. Pure conduct in regard to the 4 requisites of life. Using these requisites with wise reflection. Yoniso manasikara. Not with greed. Apart from keeping this moral precepts, it's recommended to undertake and suitable to one's personal disposition. Some of these 13 austere practices which are permitted by Gautama Buddha in order to increase contentment, effort, and seclusion, to eliminate defilements, to purify one's moral conduct, to complement and fulfill one's other religious observances, and to support one's overall spiritual practice. 2. Training in higher mind, ati sita sika, concentration, purification of the mind. Sita visuddhi, to develop the quality and the ability of the mind until there is an adequate concentration to act as a basic for insight. The Visuddhi Magga says that this extends from access concentration, upacharya samadhi, up to the attainment of concentration of the 8 jhanas, concentration of absorptions, the 4 pairs, 8 jhanas. It presents ways of developing concentration up to the attainment of the 5 mundane supernormal powers, abhinya. The third is the training in the higher wisdom, atipanya sika, knowledge of conditions, nata parina, recognitions of noble truths of dukkha, purification of views, ditti visuddhi. Knowledge of true nature of the body and the mind, which removes the misapprehension of self-view. The level of purification is also called the definite knowledge of mind and body. Nama rupa paricheta nana. Here one knows that all existing things fall under the category of mind and matter. One is able to distinguish through one's own experience what is mind and what is matter. For example, when seeing an object, one knows that the sense base is the eye. The light, the visual form, and the color are aspects of materiality, while the eye consciousness, or the act of seeing, is not aspect to mentality. Recognition of the noble truths and the origin of dukkha, purification of knowledge leading to the end of doubt. Kanka vitarana visuddhi. One accurately knows the continuality of mind and body in line with dependent origination, pati samupata, both forward and backwards. The law of action of karma, the process of cognition, the 3 cycles of vata, or any other perspective revealing that all conditioned things originated from conditioning factors that are independent. This knowledge brings to the end of doubt about the 3 periods of time, the periods of times of past, present, and future. It is also called the knowledge of conditioning factors of the mind and body. Nama rupa upachara parikara na. The commentaries refers to someone with knowledge as a stream enterer. Kura sotapana, this is the little stream enterer. His or her destiny is assured as one's progressing in Gautama Buddha's dispensation. Through knowledge of the 3 characteristics, tiratna parina, recognitions of the noble truth of the path, purification of knowledge regarding to path, not path, maga nana dasana visuddhi, the investigation of material and immaterial phenomenon in the light of the 3 characteristics. For example, one reflects on the nature of form as being impermanent, subject to stress, not self, and then reflects in a similar manner in the 4 immaterial aggregates: feeling, perception, volitional formation, and consciousness. This investigation extends to all groups of phenomena. For example, the 12 sense spheres, ayatana, the 12 factors of dependent origination, pati samupata, the 3 realms, bhava, the 4 jhanas, the 4 unbounded states, apana mana, the 8 concentration attainments, samapati, all which fall under the categories of the 5 skandha, the 5 aggregates, until one discerns the arising and passing away of conditioned phenomenon. The investigation gives rise to incipient insight, dharana vipassana. At this point, the 10 defilements of insight, vipassana upakelesa, may also arise, causing a person to believe falsely that he is enlightened or leading to a person to attach to these mental qualities. The misunderstanding results in misdirected practice. If one possesses mindfulness and clear comprehension, however, then one is able to distinguish the correct path and avoid getting stuck in these defilements. It is at this point that one reaches the purification of knowledge regarding path and not path. There are some complicated passages in the Visuddhimagga on the level of purification. The level of insight in regard to generate this purification is called inductive insight, Naya Vipassana. A person contemplates by using the method of investigation described in the Tipitaka, the Pali Canon. For example, one may reflect on a particular form, rupa, as past, present, or future, internal or external, etc. That is, anicca, impermanent, without exception. It is also called contemplation by groups, karapa, samanasana. The knowledge arising in this stage of purification is sometimes called investigative knowledge of mind and body, of light of the 3 characteristics. Samanasana. When this investigative knowledge becomes strong, one begins to see the arising and the falling of things, to see the transitory things of nature, that every object exists dependent on conditioned factors and cease to exist when these factors are absent. The knowledge of birth and decay, upaya, gradually comes about. This knowledge is new, and at this stage is called incipient insight, dharana vipassana, or dharana vipassana. A person possessing these incipient insight is called the beginner of insight, arata vipassana, and is susceptible to the defilements of insight. For example, luminosity in the mind, which leads to distract and obstruct practitioners. With proper discernment, one is able to pass beyond these defilements and complete the stage of purification. Knowledge resulting in liberation and abandonment of ignorance, pahana parina. Purification of knowledge by the way of practice, patipatana dasana visuddhi. This refers to the highest level of insight, endowed with the 9 stages of insight knowledge, vipassana, beginning with the knowledge of birth and decay, and subsequent release of all the kalesas of insight, defilements of insight, up to the final stage of insight, to full awakening. These are the 9 stages of insight knowledge. A, knowledge of birth and decay, or the clear seeing of the arising or passing away from the 5 skandhas, the understanding of all things that are impermanent, unable to sustain their original state, that they are not subject to control by desire. Everything that is subject to arise is subject to cessation. In each moment of cessation, of cognition, a person here discerns the origination of mind, of body, and the act of knowing. One knows and sees simultaneous cessation of these qualities. This insight is a powerful and dispels the perception of permanence, the perception of adherence, happiness, and the perception of self. B, knowledge of dissolution. When one is able to see that this birth and decay in the more continuous, uninterrupted way, one begins to focus on the endpoint, on cessation, nirodha, one reflects that all things are subject to dissolution. C. Knowledge of the fearfulness of appearance of conditions. By contemplating dissolution to which all things are subject, one sees all conditioned things, regardless of which realms of existence they are found, are terrifying since they offer no safety, must come to destruction. D. Knowledge of disadvantages. When one sees that all things are subject to decay and offer no safety, one reflects on the disadvantages, flaws, and inherent unsatisfactoriness of things. E. Knowledge of disenchantment. When one recognizes the disadvantages of conditioned things, one becomes disenchanted with them and does not indulge in them. F. Knowledge of the desire for deliverance. With the arising of disenchantment, one wishes to escape from conditioned phenomenon. G. Reflective knowledge, foreseeing the path, Magga. With the wish to escape, one resumes the investigation of conditions in light of the three characteristics to find the way to gain freedom. H. Knowledge from equanimity regarding to all formations. When one investigates conditioned things, one sees their true nature, develops equanimity towards them. One is either delighted by nor adverse to condition. One sees nibbida as a way of peace. One lets go of attachment to conditioned things and gravitate towards nibbida. The knowledge is known as the pinnacle of insight, Sikha Pata Vipassana, because it reaches the highest goal, or the generative rate of insight, because it links a person's to the path, which is the way out of attachment. And finally, I. Compatible knowledge for realizing the truth. When one has developed equanimity, one is intent on nibbida. Knowledge favorable to realizing the truth follows. This is the final stage of insight knowledge. Following this compatible knowledge is lineage knowledge, knowledge that marks the transition point between ordinary person and an awakened person. Point between the ordinary person and unawakened person. From this point, path knowledge arises, which leads to awakening. Lineage knowledge does not fall in other stage of purity. Neither the previous stage of purification of knowledge is the way of practice, nor the following this path of purity is the knowledge to vision, but rather it falls in between. However, it is still considered a distinct level of insight since it's part of insight process. And finally, purity of knowledge and vision. This purity follows from lineage knowledge. It is equivalent to path knowledge. The arising of a particular path knowledge is followed by corresponding fruit knowledge, depending on the level of awakening. As stated above, it is the purity that enables a person to be enlightened, to reach the highest goal in Buddhism. With the realization through path and fruit knowledge, reviewing knowledge arises with reflects on path and fruit, on abandonment, defilements, on remaining defilements, and nibbida. Arihats do not reflect on the remaining defilements. This reviewing knowledge concludes the process of realizing a particular stage of enlightenment.